Evet sayın hocalarım, Uluslararası Politik, Ekonomik ve Sosyal Araştırmalar Kongresi'ne öncelikle hoş geldiniz diyorum. Şu anki oturumumuzu gerçi İngilizce başlattık ama sunumların hepsi Türkçe başlattık ama sunumların hepsi İngilizce gerçekleştirilecek. Birazdan teknik arkadaşımız bu konularla alakalı yardımcı olacak. Oturumumuzda 6 tane sunum var. Bu 6 sunumun bir kısmı online olarak, bir kısmı da video sunum şeklinde gerçekleşmiş olacak. Ben burada söz hakkını Uğur Bey'e bırakıyorum. Hepinize başarılar diliyorum hocam. Görüşmek üzere.
Merhabalar sayın hocalarım. From now on, I will speak English because all the papers are in English. First of all, I would like to give the speak right to Merve Bekir to present her paper, The Eyre Affair as a Postmodern Parody of Jane Eyre. We are listening to you.
Okay, thank you. Today I want to talk about Jasper Ford's book, The Eyre Affair, and how it can be read as a parody of Jane Eyre. So first, I'd like to give some information on the book. Published in 2001, The Eyre Affair is Jasper Ford's first novel and also the first installment of his Thursday Next novels. This is a novel which is set in alternate 1985, and in this parallel world, the Crimean War still continues between Russia and England. Dodos can be kept as pets, since cloning kits are over-the-counter products and time traveling is an ordinary thing. Literature is also taken very seriously, and literary figures are like celebrities. Children swap bubblegum cards of Henry Fielding on the street. A group called Baconians go from door to door, trying to convince people that it was Francis Bacon, not Shakespeare, who penned the greatest plays in English history. The main character of the book is a 30-year-old woman called Thursday Next. She is a literary tech, that is, a detective working for the Literary Detection Division of the Special Operations Network, where crimes of literary forgery are handled. Thursday's own family is also quite unusual. Her father can travel in time, and her brain uncle Mycroft invents a machine called Prose Portal, which enables his wife Polly to visit Wordsworth's poems, and even do a bit of flirting with Wordsworth by the lake. However, things turn serious when a villain called Echeron Hades steals the Prose Portal in order to kidnap characters from books. He kidnaps a minor character from the original manuscript of Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit and kills him, which causes this character to disappear from all the copies around the world. With all of these events in the background of the story, an important part of the novel is actually about Jane Eyre, hence the title of the book. The Eyre Affair is actually a parody of Jane Eyre, and since parody is a controversial term to some extent, I think it would be useful to have a look at the term parody first. Well, first of all, it should be noted here that it is difficult to define parody due to the fact that it is used to refer to different things by various critics. Its vagueness even lies under its etymological root. The ancient Greek word parodia is the word where the modern term derives from, and here parodia can be literally translated as canter, here para meaning canter song, para meaning counter, and odos meaning song. Yet, in A Theory of Parody, Linda Hutcheon also points out that the Greek prefix para actually has two meanings. The first meaning is counter or against, but it can also mean beside in Greek. Looking at various definitions of parody, it can be clearly seen that it is the counterpart that critics have usually focused on, and parody is often seen as parasitic. It is true that parody imitates by its nature, but it should also be noted here that not all imitation has to be negative. We can think of neoclassical authors here who imitated classical texts as they admire and wanted to rewrite them in a contemporary sense, thinking that they could attain excellence only by following the classical rules. In claiming that parody does not need to have a negative attitude towards its target or that it should not be associated with ridicule, one of the most influential works has been A Theory of Parody by Linda Hutcheon. In this work, Hutchins objects the opinion that regards parody as parodistic and also disagrees with the critics who attribute ridicule to parody. Instead, she even argues that parody does not have to be comic at all. So in order to define parody, she avoids using ridicule or comic and defines parody as, quote, repetition with critical distance, end quote. However, she is also criticized, especially by Margaret Rose, who addresses different approaches to parody in another extensive work, which is called Parody, Ancient Modern and Postmodern. Rose claims that the late modern separation of parody from the comic is related to the critics' attempt to raise parody to a higher status by disengaging it from comic, which is often regarded to be associated with lower forms such as burlesque. Here, Rose points out that there is no need to separate parody from the comic. On the contrary, parody should have both comic and intertextual elements together. So she defines parody as, quote, the comic refunctioning of preformed linguistic or artistic material, end quote. Although Hutchins and Rose agree on the transformation process of parody, they differ in their view of the role of laughter in this process. Rose's definition seems to give a more grounded explanation, I think, since Hutchins' definition may be considered too broad and it includes other examples of intertextual or metafictional texts which diverge from parody. This presentation will examine how the Eyre Affair may be read as a postmodern parody in accordance with Rose's definition, showing the ways which Ford uses laughter in order to transform Jane Eyre in a humorous manner. Historically, originality used to be one of the most important qualities of a work. However, this view changed with the arrival of the late modern and postmodern eras. Many critics have argued that it is actually not quite possible to write a truly original work of art because there is always a relationship with other texts. After Julia Kristeva coined the term intertextuality to refer to the interrelationship of all texts, as every text is a transformation of other texts, many other critics have also followed her. It is not difficult to see the relationship between parody and intertextuality at this point, as parody's main function is to borrow from other texts, which caused Hutchins to even call parody a perfect postmodern form. Hutchins is right in saying that parody is a perfect form to see the workings of postmodernism. However, this is not because parody is specifically a postmodern form, but rather it is because the way they both work overlaps in their hybrid nature. In one of his interviews, Ford explicitly explained the postmodernist aim of his by saying that he decided to use Jane Eyre because he thinks that it is, quote, fun to mix highbrow and lowbrow humor, end quote. He makes use of a literary classic and blends this high work of art with popular elements. And in a way, using Fiedler's famous phrase on postmodernism, he closes the gap between the high and the low in a perfectly postmodernist way. Additionally, yes, Ford revisits Jane Eyre in this book, but he does not just take parts from Jane Eyre and paste them as a pastiche, rather he adds irony and humor to intertextual and metafictional elements, which also matches up with Rose's definitions of parody. In the Eyre Affair, Ford borrows Jane Eyre herself from the original work, and he does this literally as Jane is kidnapped from the book into his own fiction. The lines between the fiction and real life, the words of different fictional words get quite blurred as the characters move into and out of books. During her visit as a child to Howard House, where Brontes used to live once, Thursday finds herself in Jane Eyre with the help of a Japanese tourist. In the Eyre Affair, every character in Jane Eyre seems to be aware that they are all characters in a fictional book, and they are living in a world of fiction. For example, when Hada's friend Hobbs goes into the book in order to kidnap Jane, he tells Grace Poole that he wants Jane, and in return gets the humorous reply of, quote, so does Mr. Rochester, but he doesn't kiss her until page 181, end quote. So although the world in Jane Eyre appears to be a real place which can be visited for Thursday, it is not real as we know it, but it is rather a false reflection of a fictional world. The visits of people like Thursday in Jane Eyre also have an effect on the novel itself as a text. Another postmodern concept of that of the author, which holds that an author's intentions or his background is not important in interpreting a text, gets a new turn in Port's words. Here, the author, Charlotte Bronte, is literally dead, but this does not prevent the story, whether its small details or important parts like the ending, to be changed. Although it is known by everyone in Thursday's world that Bronte wrote the book, characters themselves and even outsiders such as Thursday, Hades, or Hobbes can change the course of events dramatically and cause the events to change into current situations. For example, Thursday causes changes in the parts that readers were unhappy about, such as the vague endings of Mr. and Mrs. Rochester, or the fact that Jane and Mr. Rochester do not unite in the end. While Thursday changes the book in a pure Brontean way, as one of the characters says, the characters in Jane Eyre can also affect Thursday's story in a similar way. Just like Thursday's prevention of Jane getting married to St. John Rivers and marrying Rochester instead, Rochester also causes Thursday to change her mind and marry Landon, whom she really loves. Here, it should be noted that what makes the comic elements in parody different from the one in irony is that the author's revealing of humor and the recognition of it by the reader changes considerably in these two styles. It is true that both irony and parody have a second message to be conveyed that lies under the text itself. However, as Rose suggests, unlike irony, which hides its real intention to be decoded, parody actually has a function of revealing it in order to make the reader laugh as he recognizes the second message. In other words, a reader who is familiar with the target text and who is able to understand the references to it is the ideal audience of parody. In one of his interviews, Ford says the reason he chose Jane Eyre in the first place is the fact that it is known by a lot of readers. Quote, "What is important for me with Jane Eyre is that, even if you have not read the book or seen the movie, you still know her. She is already there in people's minds. If the Eyre Affair was about obscure characters in a Babbler novel, then there is no gag. The fact it is Jane Eyre, like Dickens, is kind of rock solid, and when you go through the looking glass, when you start shifting them and wobbling them, then that's the gag." End quote. So Ford bases his novel upon this popularity of Jane Eyre and uses it as a target text for his parody. In case there are readers who have not read the book or have forgotten the plot, he reminds the plot of Jane Eyre in various parts of the Eyre Affair, and to explain his aim, he says, quote, "I considerately put in a preface of Charlotte Bronte's work for anyone who hasn't read it." End quote. As the humor of the Eyre Affair comes from the fact that it's a parody of Jane Eyre, its humor depends on the recognition of this relationship between two texts by the reader. So Ford agrees that the reader should be able to read the Eyre Affair as a parody of Jane Eyre, so as to grasp the intended humor. As a conclusion, we can say that although parody has been a controversial term throughout different periods, and it still looks far from reaching a consensus over the subject, I think Rose's definition seems to give a more clear and specific idea of parody, with its focus on parody's two main elements, which are intertextuality, metafictionality, and comic. Both of these characteristics can be seen clearly in the Eyre Affair, since Ford uses Jane Eyre as a target text, borrowing from it and using it to create a new text with the addition of humor. Thus, we can say that the book can be read as a good example to address the main points that Rose points out in her definition of parody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. For the second presentation, I will broadcast a video which is named, I will tell you now, Location Decisions of Multinational Enterprises, which was written by Ahmet Yağmur Ersoy and Mustafa İlteriş Yılmaz. The video is about 8 minutes long. I will now broadcast it, and you will see it on your PC laptop.
Dear participants, hello, my name is I am a PhD candidate at Edinburgh University, and firstly, I would like to say that my first academic paper and first academic presentation. Please forgive my example. As you see, authors of the paper are Assistant Professor Ahmet Yalçın Ersoy and the title of the paper is Rotational Procedures of Multinational Enterprises. The plan of the presentation is basic problematic, purpose, importance, method and then content, and conclusion. The basic problematic of the paper is what FDI theory states about choice of location, which is one of the most important decisions in international trade activity. To mention the purpose of the study, I can say that it is aimed to categorize the various theories about investment decisions of multinational companies with country-specific, industry-specific, and firm-specific dimensions. In addition, this study aims to provide a framework to provide inputs for future studies. Importance. What is study's importance? The definition of the locations is compiled by the literature review technique, and it will be contributed to the literature flow and categorization with country-specific and firm-specific dimensions, and the studies will be developed with eclectic research and contributed to the related accumulation of the field. In the study, we applied product research method literature review technique with content analysis. Generally accepted foreign direct investment theories that have led the literature on international trade and location selection have been evaluated. Multinational companies constitute the focus of the study. And then let's take a look at the content of the study. As I mentioned before, the focus of the work is multinational companies. So, first of all, why multinational companies? Because multinational corporations are at the center of current international politics and international communication. Moreover, multinational enterprise, which is one of the building blocks of integration, is one of the first forces that creates both pushing and pulling factors. As you see, there is a definition of MNE. Multinational enterprise is an enterprise that engages in foreign direct investment and owns or in some way performs value-added activity in more than one country. So, it's a multinational enterprise. The firm should operate some of its works abroad. At that point, the main instrument of multinational enterprises is foreign direct investments. Then, what are FDI theories briefly? wave theory, Buckley and Chesson internalization theory, Krugman's Smith-Wright theory, Porter's cluster theory, Dunning's eclectic paradigm. And dimensional FDI theories are, it doesn't show it with here, that's shown here. Country-specific advantage includes eclectic paradigm, product life cycle theory, internalization theory, which industry-specific advantage includes cluster theory, or Porter, internalization theory again, Cave's theory of three caves, and economic geography theory by Krugman. And lastly, firm-specific advantage. These are eclectic paradigm, internalization theory, and industrial organization theory from Hyman and Handel. As a conclusion of this study, models mentioned above are generally and quickly tested, and findings generalized as theories. In this study, it is not claimed to test any empirical models. Claim is to categorize recent studies via literature research methodologically. In the future research, we will examine the locational decisions of MNDs, which prefers Turkey as a host country, and the locational effects of MNEs will be categorized as the form of host countries. This study will have an input role for these future studies. Thank you for your attention. Best regards.
We would like to give our thanks for this presentation to Ahmet Yağmur Ersoy and Mustafa İteriş Yılmaz. Now the next presentation will be again Merve Bekir Yazıcı, and the name of the presentation is Middlemarch and Wordsworth. Now we are listening to you again, please.
Okay, thank you. So now I would like to talk about George Eliot's famous book Middlemarch and how Wordsworth affected Eliot, and also, of course, her book Middlemarch, and how we can see these effects on this book. First of all, let's have a look at Romanticism. So when we talk about the era of Romanticism, the first person to come to mind would be William Wordsworth. He was a poet whose influence was so strong that his publication of lyrical ballads with Coleridge brought about a new era in literature. Rejecting the rules, strict orders, and rationalism of the neoclassical era, Romantic poets and writers gave importance to self-expression, individual imagination, nostalgia, memories, nature, and the exotic. The root of these ideas can be traced to lyrical ballads, and the preface to it in the second edition. In the preface, Wordsworth explained why they chose these subjects with Coleridge and what their literary view was, which marked out the general characteristics of Romanticism. Wordsworth and Romanticism were influential not only in their own days, but also in later periods. As a Victorian writer, George Eliot was also affected from the previous Romantic movement. As a result, her appreciation for Wordsworth poetry and his influence on Eliot's works have usually been an interest for critics. Eliot's keen pleasure in his poetry goes back to her early years, and the effects of it can be seen in most of her works, either directly or indirectly. Apart from using the themes of Wordsworth, she also often directly quoted his poems in her works. After reading his poetry, she told Maria Lewis in 1846 that, quote, "I have never before met with so many of my own feelings expressed just as I could like." End quote. It can be seen in her words that she did not only take pleasure from these works, but also she was deeply influenced by him. In Middlemarch, as Wordsworth does, she meticulously investigates common people while trying to demonstrate a clear, vivid, and true picture. The novel's subtitle, A Study of Provincial Life, reflects this aim of Eliot. In her work, Eliot carefully studies the people living in the rural area in a realistic way as much as possible and tries to reflect truthfulness. Still, it should be kept in mind that Eliot's realism is different from general Victorian realism. The Victorian era was an industrial period powered by scientific and technological advances, and in which period absolute truth and facts were gaining importance. Eliot rather combined realism with imagination without getting away from the true picture of people and events, just as Romantic poets did in their poems. Eliot's characters were usually from rural areas. She agreed with Wordsworth in that, quote, "art is nearest thing to life." End quote. According to Wordsworth, the poet's function was, quote, "to bind together by passion and knowledge the vast empire of human society." End quote. And in agreement with him, Eliot said one of her letters, quote, "The inspiring principle which alone gives me courage to write is that of so presenting our human life as to help my readers in getting a clear conception and a more admiration of those vital elements which bind men together and give a higher worthiness to their existence." End quote. However, it should be noted here that, although Romantic poets used common people in their poetry very much, they did not give much information about people's daily lives. In Eliot, there is more observation and details in the characters, and her depictions about common folk are sharper and more detailed. She presents the reader mind observations in intellectual, psychological, physical, and emotional levels. The most important family to picture common folk in the novel is the Garth family. Caleb Garth and his family live in such a small way. Caleb Garth works outdoors with the land, also adding a romantic nature theme in the story. As an escape from from his problems, Fred Vincy usually visits the Garth family and spends his time mostly with them. I should also add that in Middlemarch, ordinary life and experience that the characters gain through it are also very important for the characters. They get more mature through experience. For example, while Fred Vincy's attitudes and behaviors change throughout the story, Dorothea's view of marriage and her expectations from it also change after experiencing a marriage with Cosimo. Another romantic element in the story is the use of memory. For Wordsworth, memories, especially childhood ones, were of great importance. Eliot also uses memories in Middlemarch in a similar way. For example, the memories from childhood and growth through them are important elements between Mary Garth and Fred Vincy. Besides connections of Fred and Mary's childhood memories, effects of memory more noticeably can be seen in Dorothea. The memories of her previous experiences keep alive in her mind and link her past and present together. She usually recalls her days in Rome, and she usually feels that they, quote, "fix themselves in her memory even when she was not thinking of them." End quote. As Dorothea gains new experiences and new memories are added to the present ones, her view of life and perceptions also change with them. When she first sees her future home with Cosimo, she finds nothing to alter at the house. However, after her disappointments in Rome in her wedding journey, she begins to see the same things in a different way. When they arrive home, the furniture in the room seems, quote, "to have shrunk since she saw it before." End quote. Also, quote, "the ideas and hopes which were living in her mind when she first saw this room nearly 3 months before were present now only as memories." End quote. because her perceptions have changed through new experiences. Dorothea's perception of the miniature of Will Laidslaw's grandmother also changes after she has come back with different memories and experiences to her new home. The use of imagination, which is a characteristic of Wordsworth, is also important in Dorothea's life throughout the novel. Characters in the story usually have their kind of imaginative thoughts, but not all of them are the same in this concept. Here, Deborah Heather Rosen points out the difference between Rosamond and Dorothea and says that, quote, while the egoism of both heroines causes them to weave their future wifely roles through a distorting haze of fantasy and wish fulfillment, it is precisely the common routine of daily efforts and duties that is evoked and glorified by Dorothea's imaginative expectations, whereas Rosamond's daydreams are, by contrast, all of a more insubstantial and escapist nature. End quote. As she also said, the difference is clear between Rosamond and Dorothea's ways of looking at flatness of their lives. Dorothea's way of looking at flatness is different from Rosamond's. She looks at it from a different perspective and finds an escape in common life. And after her assumptions that there is a romantic relationship between Rosamond and Will Ladislaw, she again turns to ordinary life. She looks from her window and watches, quote, a man with a bundle on his back and a woman carrying her baby, and she feels that she is a part of that involuntary palpitating life. End quote. In addition to Rosamond and Dorothea, Lydgate also has kind of imagination, but he fails to show a similar enthusiasm, which he holds for his work at home with Rosamond, and at the end he loses on both sides. Lastly, the theme of nature, which was perhaps the most important theme in Wordsworth poetry, is dominant in Middlemarch. Wordsworth made a great impression upon the 19th century's view of nature, and most of the Victorian writers and poets, among whom was also Eliot, were affected by him. Eliot appreciated Wordsworth's views, and to her, quote, Wordsworth was not, as he was to many Victorians, merely the mild celebrant of nature's beauties, but a moralist and teacher whose thought was sympathetic to her own mind. End quote. She used the theme of nature especially in her early novels, in a way Wordsworth and Romantics use in their works. Of course, she did not directly use the same methods. She had her own way and used Romantic view by uniting it with her own perceptions. She, like most of Romantics, longed for the tranquility of nature. During Fred and Rosamond's ride to Stone Court, she pictures the scenery in a detailed way. She says there is, quote, joy in landscape, end quote, which is a very prominent characteristic view of the Romantic era. Dorothea is another character in the novel that uses landscape and nature for her thoughts mostly. As I have stated, she turns to common life and the view through her curtains for her troubles in her mind. She opens the curtains, watches the people walking, and becomes part of that life and does not watch them as a mere spectator. When in Rome, although she is surrounded by glorious churches, she finds her peace of mind in, quote, choosing to drive out to the Campagna where she could feel alone with the earth and the sky. End quote. When she is in the Hall of Statues, part of Vatican Museum, she thinks about English landscape, not the statues. After returning from Rome, she continues to watch the landscape, which consists of a road, an open field and trees, through her window a couple of times. Landscape also reflects Dorothea's mood throughout the novel, and as her perception of her boudoir changes with her memories, so does her perception of nature according to her own experiences. As a conclusion, it can be said that Wordsworth's influence as a Romantic poet can be seen throughout the novel. Of course, Eliot had her own way in writing and creating the scene and characters. However, how Wordsworth had an effect on the writings of Eliot should be kept in mind while reading the novel, as Eliot had her influence from Romantic period as much as from the Victorian era. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. The other presentation was going to be a video presentation, but the video is not working at the moment. That's why, if there isn't any question, I would like to give word to Ayfer Özyılmaz to present the role of internal migration in reducing regional poverty, which was made with Yüksel Bayraktar. We are listening to you now, if there isn't any question. I think there is no question. Now we are listening to you. Do you hear me? Is there a problem?
Yeah. I will look the presentation. Okay.
Now we
I
would like to.
I can see in the. So sorry. I want to open the presentation, but I can't find in the computer.
You need to share your view.
I know before we try this, but
it's on the left side. It's on the left side of the screen.
Okay. I can.
Green button.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, now no problem.
Okay. No, you can see. Can you see?
Yes, we see.
Okay.
We are listening. Okay.
Yeah. My subject is the role of internal migration in reducing regional poverty. Plan of this study, purpose, scope, and method, the importance of migration, internal migration poverty relationship, literature, analysis results, conclusion references. The aim of this study is to analyze the impact of internal migration on poverty at the regional level in Turkey. Firstly, the theoretical framework of the impact of internal migration on poverty has been established. Secondly, the impact of internal migration on regional poverty is analyzed. Method of the study, the impact of internal migration on regional poverty is analyzed by using random effect model that ranges between 2008 and 2015 at level 1 for Turkey. When the internal and international migration are evaluated with regards to the effect and results, it might seem that these two contain many differences, especially in the developing countries. The contribution of the internal migration to the decrease of poverty and the economic growth has much more important potential than international migration. Four significant factors came into prominence in attaining this difference between internal and international migration. These factors may be expressed as wide remittance obtained after international migration reached a limited number of people, the remittance obtained after internal migration spread to a broader and poorer base. Internal migration showed a more rapid increase than international migration. International migration rather comprised the poor community and plays a powerful role in achieving the Millennium Development Goals. Internal migration are considered as an important source in many countries, such as agriculture, manufacture, construction, and coastal economies. Internal migration came forward as a result of many changes, such as insufficiency of employment opportunities, insufficient health and educational service, and primarily poverty in the rural areas, along with the transition from agricultural societies to industrial societies. This process caused the internal migration to cities to accelerate even more. On the other hand, the factor that brings the effect of internal migration on regional poverty to the forefront remittance. Especially the remittance central-based migrant families make a contribution to the rural development and also to reducing the chronic poverty by increasing the standard of their living. The remittance which prevent individuals living in the rural areas to be driven to poverty by providing side income source in the rural areas also bring along many different results in many countries. For example, in remittance in China, induce an effect that decreases poverty, whereas in South Asia, these remittances cause the immigrating families to spend 15% more on nutrition and migrating families to have a better living condition. In Bangladesh, while the poverty in immigrant households decreased at the ratio of 30%, only enables most of the immigrant households in Cambodia to meet the short-term nutrition and agricultural requirements. Similarly, in India, the important amount of the remittance is transferred to the poorest part of the country. In Vietnam, 2/3 of the migrants' families transfer their incomes they earned after migration to their families. In Bangladesh, 60% of the incomes of the migration incomes are transferred to the immigrating households and constitutes the 80% immigrating households incomes. Yuan Lu analyzed the effect of internal migration and poverty in various states of China. In accordance with the study, migration prominently reduced rural poverty by increasing the income of the poor households more than the income of the rich households. Moreover, migration enabled the absorption of the excess labor in rural regions, raised the life standard of the rural household by providing side income and sharing the revenue gap. According to Evan Blatial, the internal migration in Ghana affect the human capital positively and increase the migrants' general level of welfare by improving the living condition. Moreover, it was observed that the migrants live in better condition in comparison to their prior lives, in spite of the tough condition of the urban areas they migrate to. Van de Mercure reached the indication that in South Ethiopia, internal migration made the labor more efficient in emigrating rural regions and that the remittance increased the capital stock. According to Sando and Awus, internal migration reduced poverty while enabling the fulfillment on basic construction needs in Ghana. Du et al. Concluded that in China, internal migration reduced poverty. However, this effect remains low in poverty-stricken communities, since they are not able to migrate, and state that internal migration increases the immigrating household income. Memon concluded that in the income differences between rural and urban area regions in Pakistan lead to migration, and that internal migration is efficient towards lessening poverty. Kausar also arrived at same findings in Pakistan. In consideration of the studies that emphasize the remittance, Castol et al. Concluded that in Ghana and Indiana, the remittance taking place after internal migration enter into more households and poorer households compared to the international remittance, and therefore reduces the regional poverty. Authors in Burkina Faso, Wang in some cities of China, Elena Williams in Jamaica. According to Adams et al., internal migration reduced regional poverty toward remittance in Guatemala. She reached the same findings in Ghana that the effect of international remittance has a stronger effect on poverty, since the amount of the remittance obtained after international migration is relatively higher. However, Campbell and Kandala did not find any significant effect of remittance on poverty in Botswana. Adam et al. Did not observe any effect of internal migration on poverty in Mexico. However, they state that international migration have a lessening influence on poverty. Dataset and methods, random effects model are used in the model. The dependence variable of the model is regional poverty data. Model in here we can see. Describes statistics. Northeastern Anatolia is the region with the highest poverty level. The highest GDP rate is Istanbul. Istanbul is the region receiving the highest level of migration. The highest immigrating region is the West Marmara. It can also be observed that rural public investment expenditure are the highest in West Anatolia. The highest export per capita is in East Marmara. Istanbul takes the place at top concerning import per capita. Northern Anatolia is the region where regional inequality is highest. Correlation metrics. In accordance to correlation metrics, there is a negative relationship between regional poverty and migration. There is a positive relationship between regional poverty and inequality. Moreover, there is a negative relationship between regional poverty and GDP per capita. Hausmann test statistic result. According to Hausmann test, we will use random effect model. analysis results when the model is analyzed a negative and statistically significant relationship at the level 10% was determined between internal migration and regional poverty. In other words, immigration reduces regional poverty. On the other hand, no significant relationship was determined between immigration and regional poverty. Conclusion in the study, the effect of internal migration on regional poverty on the basal level 1 in Turkey was analyzed with panel data econometrics. In accordance with the analysis results, receiving migration reduces regional poverty in Turkey. On the other hand, no effect of immigration on regional poverty was found in study. Two important factors played a role in obtaining these results. First factor is that internal migration in Turkey primarily comprises of individuals from households who are dependent on each other. The remittances are not transferred to these regions where immigration takes place in case no family member is left in the region after the migration, and therefore this situation leads to the insufficient of migration in these immigrating regions. And the second factor is that the fact that the educational migration have an important place within internal migration. The high rate of educational migration leads both for the remittance to be insufficient in immigrating regions and to the loss of skilled labor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now all the presentations are made and were made, and I'm gonna end this session if there isn't any question. I guess there is no question. Thank you for your participation to this session. Online session 17 for the ICPES Congress will now end. Thank you again. See you later.
Thank you.